Labor have claimed victory decisively in the by-election in the outer Melbourne seat of ASTON. There'll be plenty of people who want to make this a story about parliamentary leadership or about whether the Liberal Party needs to remake themselves in the image of the urban left. But the facts are actually much simpler. Roshena Campbell was an outstanding candidate, a bright and accomplished barrister with the capacity to make a real ministerial contribution. The same couldn't be said of the Labor candidate. But Roshena was not a creature of the outer eastern suburbs, the doing it tough workers, the tradies, teachers, small business owners and nurses of Boronia, Bayswater and Ferntree Gully. She might be a winning candidate for a seat like Higgins, but there's a very different experience of life for those who live over 40 kilometres away in ASTON. Now, that's not a judgment on Ms Campbell, but she was a candidate imposed by the Central Administration Committee of the party, all of whom also look rather urban, more Higgins than, say, ASTON. And it meant they didn't really notice the problem. This is not so much a tale of parliamentary leadership as it is a tale of two Australias. Those people living in the wealthy inner cities and those who are in the aspirational outer suburbs. It is only by reconnecting with the way that the Liberal values of Menzies serve both the urban and the outer suburban, as well as the regional, with common sense, dignity, by fostering aspiration, freedom and strong families, that the bridge between those different places and ways of life can be built. That means, though, we need serious product differentiation from the Liberal Party. Labor and the Coalition believe in fundamentally different things for your family and for this nation. But if the Coalition just play Labor light, you can't blame voters for ultimately going for the real thing. That's my take on the ASTON by-election, but let's bring in Michael Kroger, former Victorian Liberal Party president, for his thoughts. Michael, thank you so much for joining me tonight. What do you think of the perspective that a candidate from outside of ASTON, and in fact a long way from it, was ultimately a bit of a mistake, something of a Christina Keneally effect?
No, I understand what you're saying. I think completely different to Christina. She was just seen to be someone who hopscotched every seat she could possibly, or they could find for at head office. No, I think, I understand your point. No candidate is beyond criticism. I mean, the Labor candidate didn't live in the electorate, but you had in Roshena Campbell a very serious, successful, barrister, Melbourne City Councillor. She'd faced an election, married, kids. She was a product of a tough upbringing and very successful. So the party took a risk on her. I don't think anything she did led to the result. Apart from the fact that I thought she did an outstanding job.
Yeah, look, I share your view. She did really well and she's a highly credible candidate. I hope someone who will have opportunities in the future. Let's hear what Peter Dutton told insiders this morning.
By not winning the election, we've failed that test that have been set by us, for us by the Victorian people. I think there are issues in relation to policy, to personnel, issues in relation to our campaigning techniques. The fundamentals of our party, they're not going to change.
Should you stay as leader?
Of course I should.
Michael, in that grab, leader Peter Dutton says that policies won't change. Do you think they should?
No, I think he said the structure of the party's, not necessarily going to change. Yeah, of course the policies need to change from very small target policies to something substantial. I mean, this is the way I look at the political landscape. When I was a kid, there was very little media. In Victoria, you had the Herald, you had the Sun, you had the Age, and you basically had 3AW and the ABC. Now the media, the quantity of media is 10 times, 20 times what it was when I was younger. Someone has to fill that media vacuum with content. The left are providing the content in a massive number of areas. There's not a campaign that the left aren't running to radically change our society. Global warming, The Voice, The Republic. I I mean, on and on it goes. Everywhere the left are running campaigns to change society. They're building momentum by filling the media void. The media beast must be fed, and the left are feeding it. We've sort of tended to board up the old milk bar from the inside, and we're sort of opposed to everything. Well, what are we actually in favour of? How do you inspire a new generation of voters to support you when all you're arguing for is the status quo? People need to believe their best days are ahead of them. Yeah. The Liberal Party's challenge is to make people think their best days are ahead of them under a Dutton government. Well, what are the policies, that we're prosecuting? I mean, Roshena Campbell had three things to run on. We're opposed to interest rate increases. We're opposed to cost of living increases. And there was two roads down the road that Labor defunded. That was all Roshena, and that was all the Federal Director, Andrew Hurst, had to run on. And for her or the Federal Director to be criticised is an utter nonsense. If the parliamentary parties, state and federal, do not have a grand narrative to make people believe their best days are ahead of them, you will not win elections. And the failure of the Liberal Party across the country in the last 10 years is a failure of thinking. No one's done the hard thinking and prosecuted arguments to help us win elections. Amanda, what's the last time we won an argument federally? When did we win an argument last on a policy issue? I think it's probably 2013 Tony Abbott on Stop the Boats, which itself was a reincarnation of 2001. In 2019, we won because we were opposing Labor's policy.
And at the moment, Michael, I just find that too often people don't want to even have the argument. They just want to capitulate. And that's terribly problematic. One of the things that hasn't been mentioned so far is that we were dealing with, in the former MP Alan Tudge, somebody who was locally very popular. Now, he might have had his other controversies, but he was able to really connect with the people of Aston and those outer suburban aspirations. How can we make sure that those needs and a vision for a better life for those people is part of the grand narrative for the future?
Well, the Liberal Party, to be successful in politics, a party has to play on its own brand equities. I mean, why do people vote for the Liberal Party? They think we're fiscally responsible, we support tradies, farmers, the productive sector, we support small business, et cetera, and we're strong on law and order, an orderly society. We look after the fiscal dollar, we look after the taxpayers' money. That's our brand equity. If there's a problem with the Medicare system, people will tend to vote Labor because that's Labor's one of their two major brand equities. So Peter Dutton, who I must say I admire greatly, I admire Dutton greatly. I thought he was an outstanding minister for immigration, home affairs, defence. He had all the hard portfolios, by the way. Peter Dutton's challenge is to wrestle the national debate onto the Liberal Party's number one brand equity, which is tax, and what we're going to do about the tax system and how the tax system is working heavily against the working middle classes. I mean, it's all very well for these big international companies to win contracts with the federal government, and they shovel some of this money through tax havens. Well, why should the Australian taxpayer, why should our monies be going through tax havens? It shouldn't be. Why should companies, and it's a time to relook at the whole
something
tax
there, Michael.
system.
I think.
Well, why do I?
Michael,
Amanda,
I think tax reform should be a part of that agenda.
Absolutely. Why do I need to be lectured by Mike Cannon Brooks from Atlassian, who doesn't pay any tax in Australia, et cetera, et cetera?
Michael, I wish we could talk about this all night, but thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your insights.